On a recent visit to the magnificent Hardwick Hall in Derbyshire, which is run by the National Trust, a local WRN member was dismayed to see that a supposed celebration of women had been targeted by a trans rights activist. A modern tapestry exhibition that was meant to honour virtuous women was deliberately spoiled when someone chose to disrespect just one woman's name, that of JK Rowling. Women from WRN Derbyshire and Staffordshire went back to Hardwick Hall to silently protest the damage, and then talked about the purpose of the art project and how the National Trust had failed to live up to this promise.
I was visiting with my WI group, and I was looking at the tapestries and looked at the fifth new tapestry that had been created by the PhD student, and literally as soon as I looked at it, JK Rowling's name hit me immediately. It's eye level. It's nobody could miss it if you were looking at the names. It's directly within your vision, and just noticed that the name had been crossed out with the colours of the trans flag. And I think my first reaction was, my heart just sank, because I just thought, the point of this piece, which is quite clearly displayed, is that it is a piece that is celebrating women, within the context of the 4 original tapestries created for Bess of Hardwick. And so I was genuinely shocked to see it. And I think my issue is that I don't care where anybody stands on this debate. It's absolutely irrelevant what your personal feelings are. But this piece, the point of it was to celebrate women, and it just made me so completely sad that something so positive couldn't just be left to celebrate women. Somebody had to come and make a political point, and we're in this day and age, we can't just have something that celebrates women. We've got to find one woman to tear down.
That's it, isn't it? It's the singling out of one particular person. Although since we have posted on social media all about this particular display, we have had a response from This Isn't Working podcast, and their last podcast was a visit to a Stonewall conference where there were 3 members of the National Trust, 3 employees of the National Trust, and also there was Maya Forstater, and they ended up sitting at a table together apparently, and Maya offered her hand, and one of the National Trust employees refused to shake her hand. So there's a theme, isn't there? There's a bit of a theme, and I think the National Trust they've got to think about how they're responding to this.
Yeah, I think it shows that they're fairly captured with gender identity ideology as a trust, and that's quite disappointing, because their members are far and wide, and a lot of them will be women with families or not families, and who come here to Hardwick to see this celebratory work of women. And a lot of them are ordinary women. A lot of people have stitched their mum's name or their auntie's name, people who they want to women who they want to celebrate. And then the National Trust is saying, but we're celebrating women, but it's okay to stitch this one out.
Yeah.
We can't just celebrate women, we have to let it be ruined by misogyny.
And it's this ideology that reigns supreme, because my point when I spoke to the curator was that I didn't believe that any other name would be allowed to be stitched out in the name of free speech or another person's opinion, because that's what I was told, that they'd had a discussion about this stitching out of JK Rowling's name, and that it was decided that because it was one person's opinion it was allowed to stand. Well, not only do I object to that on the point of the piece wasn't about debate, it wasn't about well, this person likes that woman but I don't, so I'm allowed to cross her name out. The piece was celebrating women, so by the pure fact that the defacing of her name existed, it destroyed the meaning of the piece, it made it pointless. That's one objection. But my second objection to the curator was that I didn't believe that they would have allowed it to stand for any other woman. and you know, a point I made was, you know, if a racist came in and decided to cross out the name of you know, say Michelle Obama or Kamala Harris,
Rosa Parks is on there, isn't
yeah, you know, that's ideological, and nobody that would not have been allowed to stand. You know, some people are Republicans, they might have wanted to cross out the name of Queen Elizabeth II. There's no way in a million years the National Trust would have stood for that. You know, it was pointed out to me that Margaret Thatcher was a very contentious name. You know, Hardwick Hall is in northeast Derbyshire. She's a very controversial figure here, and apparently there was a bit of a hoo-ha about the fact that her name was included. And but ultimately, you know, nobody, as strong as feeling is around here about that woman, nobody actually thought to come and cross her name or deface her name, yet it was only JK Rowling's name that someone felt that, someone would say strongly, I'd say petty, to come and make a point on a piece of art that was supposed to have a good intention, and that's the sum of it. You know, and as you say, one woman has decided that name was important to her, that she felt that JK Rowling was important to her, and you know, she admired her and wanted to put that name up, and then did someone come along and cross that name out?
Yeah, and that's what we don't know. Did someone just stitch the name themselves and cross it out themselves?
Yeah.
Or did someone come along and cross out with the trans colours somebody else's work and silenced a participant in this project?
Which is incredibly cruel. If that was the case, that's horrendous to you know, as part of this piece, women have been allowed to put any name, so it could be someone that isn't famous or in the public eye. You know, there's some people that have written mum or mummy, or just, you know, a woman's name that they know. Well, I don't know those women, and you know, we're all human beings. We've all, you know, none of us have got unblemished characters. I'm sure that those people have people who don't like them, but that's not the point. Each individual woman is important to the person who put their name forward, and that was the point and the sentiment of the piece, which, you know, National Trust have allowed to be desecrated.
Be ruined, haven't they? We did also hear last year, because we heard about the stitching last year, and we heard that some staff at the National Trust had complained that it made them feel unsafe that JK Rowling's name was on there. So obviously we don't know how true this is. That's up for the National Trust to be transparent about that, and apparently there were discussions about what names were going to be on the panel. So and the discussion was that all names should be allowed to be on there. So even during it's the participation bit of it, staff and volunteers were having input and saying, oh, well, it's making me feel unsafe. What, a woman's name stitched onto a bit of recycled fabric is making you feel unsafe? I mean, this use of the word unsafe is really inappropriate. And what action did the National Trust take from that? They need to tell us. You know, the National Trust belongs to all of us, and they can't just be taking the views of individual staff and then imposing that on all of us.
Well, and what about, how does it make women like us feel when we walk in there and see, you know, JK Rowling's name crossed out? It's really quite shocking. The image, I think it's the imagery more than anything. That imagery is really shocking. Yeah. You know, so it would make me feel unwelcome.
Well, it's just perpetuating abuse, isn't it? You know, it's and that may sound dramatic. People may say, "Oh, that's ridiculous," but you know, and I said this at the time to the curator, that the amount of death and rape threats JK Rowling has had over these past 5 years has been horrendous. The threats to her personally have just been vile, completely depraved. You know, people have turned up outside her house and tried to publicise her address, encouraging people to go there and do God knows what. And I was like, you may think that this is, you know, just a piece of stitching on on embroidery, somebody's opinion, somebody expressing themselves, but it is just perpetuating the abuse she has had for the past 5 years, by doing that. It's symbolic.
Yes.
It is absolutely symbolic.
Absolutely.
And by allowing that on a piece that is supposed to be celebrating women, I keep going back to this time and time again, you are saying this is okay. Denigrate the name of this woman.
And I don't think it particularly matters that there is somebody, I don't know if it's the same person yet again, but there's another JK Rowling stitched further up apparently. I don't really see how that makes anything any better.
No.
Especially when the name that's been stitched out is at eye level. It's the first thing
it's
you
the most
saw.
prominent.
It's there for everybody to see in its full technicolor. So I don't think, certainly as far as I'm concerned, that makes the slightest bit of difference. It's the shock of the imagery.
Yeah. I think it's quite complicit in just accepting violence against women and girls in our society, and we all and that's what it does, because that's what it's saying. It's saying we're going to erase you and silence you because you're a woman, and even though this is about celebrating women, we're going to ruin it anyway because you're women.
Yeah, it's just really, I just find it really, really sad. I did at the time, I did now, and it is, the basic thing. It's not about ideology, it's not about argument, it's not about on which side you stand. It is just, God, just can you not just do a piece about celebrating women and just have it be that? Why does it have to be about someone turning up and saying they then feel unsafe? Why does it have to be a hoo-ha? It is the most simple concept, celebrating people you admire. Why does it have to be overcomplicated? Why do we have to have a debate? Why do we have to have some big upset? Or
we couldn't have a celebration of women's names, heroes at Derby Museum last year, wasn't it? There was an exhibition based around women from the area, and there was a tree, and you could put a label and put the name of your hero on the label. Someone put JK Rowling, and of course one of the staff members immediately walked up and snatched it off them and said, "No, you can't have that."
It really shouldn't be this problematic. It's just misogyny. It's utter misogyny. It's like, and it's a tale as old as time. How do we find a way to do a woman down? How do we find a way to ruin this for them? Or how do we find a way to put those women in their place? It is a tale as old as time, and it is something that Bess of Hardwick clawed her way through life to try and get over, and she was one of the very few women that was able to buck the trend, hence the fact she is well known, hence the fact she's got these amazing houses, as testament to her achievements, because she was such an oddity. It was her and Elizabeth I. What other woman do you know that managed to buck the trend? Because it is a tale as old as time. Women have to be kept down, and it's 2025. How are we still having these arguments? Why are we still fighting this?
What would you like the National Trust to do?
I think they need to take some accountability for it. They either need to remove the piece completely because it is not fulfilling the point of what it was originally commissioned for. So what is the point of it? Or they need to put a disclaimer. It says very clearly in front of the tapestry that this is a piece commissioned to celebrate women. Well, it doesn't do that. So put a disclaimer or a sign saying, unfortunately that was the intention of this piece, but somebody felt that they needed to make a political or ideological statement, and this is not, although the National Trust doesn't agree with this, it's been left to stand to show how, we can't celebrate women in this day and age. Put that disclaimer. If the National Trust really doesn't think that it reflects their views, then make that utterly clear by condemning it.
Yes,
not just saying it doesn't reflect our views, because that's a pathetic way of just weaseling out of it.
They are complicit.
Absolutely,
they are complicit, and they have responded to our tweet online saying, "Oh, they've kind of passed the buck and blamed the public." or whoever did it and said, oh, we're letting it stand because of all diversity. But it comes back to your point that this was about celebrating women.
Absolutely.
The MO was to celebrate women. It was not to bring women down.
Yeah. And what about the woman's opinion who put JK's name forward in the first place?
Yeah.
What about that woman's opinion?
Yeah.
Well, that woman's opinion doesn't matter anymore because somebody else came along and crossed it out.
Yeah,
And
we'd love to find that woman because it was in the Gryffindor colours as well. It's in the Gryffindor colours, so clearly a Harry Potter fan. Maybe not even a women's rights fan, but just a Harry Potter fan.
Yeah.
You know, for all we know. And this woman, her stitching has just been crossed out.
yeah.
And the fact that the stitching is in the colours that it's in is a very deliberate act. If they
absolutely.
wanted to strike her name out to make a point that she's contentious, they could have just used a neutral colour stitching. But the fact that the stitching is of those colours is also significant in this, in terms of who has done it and when.
Yeah.
Because I'm not sure that a member of the public would just randomly have those bits of thread and be able to stand and sew something. It would be premeditated to do that in those colours.
Yeah. I think the placement of that particular frill as well. I mean, the dress is made up of many different frills, and each frill has several names stitched on it. I just can't believe that the placement of that frill right at eye level, that the crossed out name being prominent, I just can't believe how that could be a coincidence. Like, it just seems very weird to me, which then, that in itself suggests that is the view reflected of the artist as well. She ultimately had responsibility for putting the piece together, not responsibility for stitching the names, but for, curating the piece, putting it together. What a coincidence that it's at eye level. I wasn't looking for the name. I had absolutely no idea whose names were written on that piece. And it, like I say, it was the first thing I saw.
Shortly after our visit, a feminist campaigner unstitched the crossing out thread. The National Trust subsequently covered up the exhibit with a sheet and placed a sign alongside saying it had been tampered with. A month after our protest, the room at Hardwick that holds the dress has been closed off entirely to the public. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and tap the bell to make sure you don't miss new content. Sign up to our newsletter at www.womensrights.network, and if you're interested in becoming a member, click on the Join Us link. Be part of the conversation.